What's up, everybody? You're listening to Hey Man, the advice podcast for men. I'm Sam Graham Felsen.
I'm Avi Klein.
I'm a novelist. Avi's a therapist, and we're here to answer your questions and hopefully get a few of our own answered as well. This week, we are replaying one of our earliest episodes. It's with our friend Andrew Marantz. He's a staff writer from The New Yorker and the author of the nonfiction book Antisocial, which is just out in bookstores this week. It's a great book that chronicles Andrew's experiences spending 3 years hanging out with online trolls, alt-right maniacs, misogynists, basically the worst of what America has to offer, and doing it with a good sense of humor, but also a sense of horror. And it's a great book that explains where we are and how we got here. So hope you enjoy the conversation. Last time I saw you bringing Chopped into the office. So Andrew and I also, full disclosure, I know this week's guest. We are friends. We work in the same office space. And I've seen him bringing in Chopped. I am a patriot of Sweet Green, as you know.
Absolutely, me too.
But Andrew hates Sweet Green. But you were going to tell me you have like a whole thesis on this. But
I mean, how long version. Is this podcast? Like how? Like if you want to throw down, we can throw down. I have my allegiance to Chopped is like edging into. I mean, you can tell me as a therapist, but I think it's edging into like problem behavior. It's like when they do the addiction checklist of like, are you alienating your friends? Are you like changing your personal habits? Like when I open my phone to the Maps app, it's like, okay, the nearest Chopped is this. I don't even have to ask it. A lot of it comes down to the crispness of the lettuce, which like if you go to a Just Salad, you are dealing with soggy bullshit.
Yeah.
Like you're not even in the realm of like the baseline is there a crunch to this? Like when you're dealing with Just Salad or what are the other, I can't even remember the other bullshit ones. You like, it's like soggy cereal. It's like, why am I even doing this?
Right.
Sweet Green, I will grant you, at least has decent lettuce. It doesn't last as long because I have done the thing where I buy a salad and like save it for dinner.
Uh-huh.
Sweet Green has like very perishable, which maybe is like speaks well to their lack of preservatives. Yeah. But like doesn't help me in my life.
Yeah.
I also find that Chopped is consistently like I think their branding is off. I think their branding makes them look like they're like they should be
deli salad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they make like there's something about the signage that makes it look like it should be in a strip mall somewhere and makes it look unappealing. But the actual quality of the ingredients, like Sweet Green is always trying to do like we have basil and we have like Thai shrimp, whatever.
Total sucker for that.
Yeah,
I
don't.
The thing I hate about Sweet Green,
I don't even eat any of that stuff, and I'm like, but I want to eat it.
Yeah, I want to be associated with it. Yeah.
Well, I hate how Sweet Green like tries to act like it's a mini version of Burning Man when you go into the fucking
Totally.
place. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm getting lunch.
Well, that's the
They're
thing.
like, free your soul every time you're like, so that branding annoys me. But what I like about it, which leads me into my next question for you, I like the fact that there's actually high calorie count in these things because they always add grains and like, I'm a pescatarian, so it's hard for me to get protein. And like,
Dude.
I like the fact that there's mad quinoa up in there.
This is just three soy boys talking about salad to kick off this podcast.
I wonder when it's going to become Oat Boys because that's really the new that's really the new milk. I actually, one of the things about my book is that there are people in my book calling me soy boy, and I'm like, that's one of the most dated things about the book by the time it comes out.
Is it? That's not cool.
That's no way. Well, because meme culture just evolves so fast. Yeah. It's like you're a soy boy if you say soy boy now.
I really do love that phrase.
Isn't it? It's great, but isn't it? Now that even like people who are behind the curve like us, who still use soy boy. Ironically, of course, isn't it now cooler to just say that's soy rather than to say soy boy?
That's
you just say soy. Yeah,
that's soy raven.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, I don't. I went through a phase of trying to like reappropriate these things ironically, and now I'm just like, it's better to just
be a
human, stay out of it. Yeah.
So you talk about this a little bit in your book. You just glancingly mentioned this, but you were sort of like you were a contrarian, but you were also like sort of. Were you a punk kid or you were a little bit?
I went through phases
in high school. So like, what were the like give an example of the kind of style you rocked.
I mean, it basically was like all the empty signifiers of rebellion without actually knowing what you were rebelling for or against. So I like went through a phase where I would wear like black nail polish and like thrift store blazers in this kind of punk-ish kind of, but weird like nerd punk, like before that was really a thing. Yeah, kind of proto Weezer, like with kind of Buddy Holly glasses. I was trying to figure it out on my own, and I was not good at it. And I wasn't like savvy about it. I wasn't like reading Sassy magazine to like figure out how to do it. I was just like blundering through, and I'm not
something inside you telling you
just telling me like basically the contrarian thing. Basically, like if the dominant thing in my preppy ass Connecticut surroundings is to like whatever the brand is, like it was Abercrombie at one point. It was like there were like I remember there was a certain kind of Vans that were cool at one point. Vans could have fit with my thing, but that couldn't be my thing because that was everyone else's thing. Or like Airwalk, remember Airwalks?
Yeah.
Like that, whatever the thing was, I was just gonna do something else. Yeah. Which actually, my mom made a great point in one of those phases where I was like growing my hair out and it looked terrible because I didn't get that you couldn't just look like Sean from Boy Meets World if you were like a Jew with like kinky hair. So I was just like, when is it going to look cool? And she was like,
this is resonating with me.
Nobody, again, like none of this.
It's crazy how many dudes of our generation like secretly, like shamefully watched and was obsessed with Boy Meets World.
Yeah. And it's like, I really want to be Sean and I'm just Corey.
Totally.
I'm just gonna be Corey. That's my lot in life.
Really
I should just embrace it.
Yeah.
It actually helped me to see Brian Krakow on My So-Called Life, because I was like, okay, I'm that guy, and that's just I just have to
he
own
was
up
the guy
to
with
it.
the curly hair.
He was the shy neighbor,
Yeah.
But my mom at one point said, you're trying to put across this whole thing about you don't give a shit, but you were like being very obvious about how much you give a shit. Like your whole look is not communicating I'm over it. Your look is communicating I'm trying really hard.
How did that go over with a to your teenage brain?
I had no comeback. Yeah. I was just like, let me think about that. Okay. And then I just like never formed a rebuttal. So that kind of broke me out of my phases.
So spending all of this time with people, for example, like Mike Cernovich, he's one of the key characters in your book. I want to just focus on, I mean, a lot of these guys are obsessed with race, with Jews, but the alt-right guys that you focus on, particularly Cernovich, seem more obsessed with gender dynamics, gender relations more than anything. Mm-hmm. And they seem, it's almost like they're less misogynistic than they are misanthropic towards soy boys, right? Like they hate soft men, right? And well, can you just like articulate for us what like the guerrilla mindset worldview is like towards like what's wrong with manhood right now in these guys' view, and like what's the solution? What's their solution? Yeah,
it's a good question. I mean, I don't know what their diagnosis is exactly because they go back and forth on it. I definitely think there's a lot of misogyny there, and I do think there's a fair amount of like misanthropy and like maybe even like self-hate or whatever. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, and even if I were, I am not qualified to, but I don't think even they know what's going on exactly. But yeah, I think it's like, I guess if I had to guess, it's like we used to know that, gender roles were meaningful and that like a man was supposed to be like the Marlboro Man and, whatever. I mean, I'm like making it hokier than they would, but I think the underlying assumption is like,
it was really clear what a man should
be. Yeah, it was clear what a man should be. It was clear that there were only two genders and that they should act like their gender stereotypes and they should, and that we're just confusing ourselves with all this other stuff. Like we're confusing, I mean, we are emasculating ourselves. We're like we're working against nature in some fundamental way. I mean, Gavin McInnes went on Fox News and told a woman on the panel, like, you would be happier if you were a housewife. He, again, claimed refuge in, I'm just a comedian, I'm just messing around. But I think he was serious. I think he thinks that if we stopped working against nature and worked just to, like, perfect ourselves according to these gender archetypes, like, our, forefathers and, well, they would say forefathers, like, knew what they were talking about when
Right.
and in its essence, it's like a basic conservative thing. Like, let's stop moving away from, like, we had it right before.
And they're also kind of obsessed with like evolutionary biology and like fight or flight, and like for whatever tens of thousands of years we were hunter gatherers, and like men had the role of hunting, and and this is hardwired into us, and like by fighting against it, this is like one of Jordan Peterson's key arguments, like by fighting against our like hardwired just like impulses as men, we like get all of this weird repression that like creates like horrible confusion and neuroses
and
like,
suicide and all these things.
Right.
I mean,
and like mass murders,
yes,
right?
Right. And I think one thing that like left critics of these people often discount is that their critiques are coming from somewhere and they're meaningful. And this isn't to say that they are well-founded. It's just to say, like, you hear people say things like, well, it's just based on hatred and fear and ignorance. And like, of course, all those things are in the mix, but I don't think that these stances are reducible to hate and fear and ignorance. I think there's
like something before that.
There's something before that. And also there's something that like isn't a pure, just like emotional aversion reaction. I mean, emotions obviously are super important, but there are things that are more easily explained by these simplistic explanations than by the more complicated explanations that just happen to be true. So like taking race and gender as examples, you can explain a lot about the world by resorting to really simplistic ideas about gender and race that actually make you have a more simple Occam's razor sounding solution. The only problem with it is that it's not true. But if you take that out of it, like, of course, like there's all these things that we're struggling to understand. Like, why do we have a rise in depression and autism? I mean, a million things that you look out into the world and go like, why are white lifespans declining at a time of economic bounty? Why is the opiate crisis? Like all these things that are very hard to understand. Yeah. And if you just go, oh, it's because we're working against our nature, that's right. A very tempting explanation. And to debunk it, you have to get into the weeds of like all kinds of social science and stuff that like that stuff.
I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, it's hard to read. It's confusing. I mean, Jordan Peterson gets around that by not really reading it very carefully, but.
Well, he's like focusing on dragons and like Hobbit myths rather. But I will say, like, so I read well, I didn't read every word because at a certain point I got exasperated. But I read a lot of 12 Rules for Life. What's it called? Yeah. His newest book, right?
Yeah.
And I will say, like, when I picked that up, first of all, I was actually going through like a difficult time where like it was actually a period where I had abandoned a novel that I was working on. I was suffering from writer's block. I was feeling like I had like stopped, like I had a kid and I had like stopped working out, and I was like getting flabby again, and like, I was drinking too much. And I have to say, like, I read like the very first chapter. It's like horribly cornily written, but it's about these lobsters. Like, you've read this, right? And it's about these lobsters, and it's about how like there's like a lobster that hunches his back is going to like get like destroyed by other lobsters who are going to like see it as an effeminate lobster or whatever. And he's not going to get any lobster tail. Just kidding. And he's going to just basically.
That's yours, right? Not his.
Yes, that was my line. But basically, he gives the simple, like the advice. Every chapter has one kind of core piece of advice. The advice in that chapter is basically like, keep your shoulders back. And I was thinking about it. I was like, wow, like I have walked around with bad posture my whole life. I've never felt particularly fucking masculine. And I started like, just for a couple of days, I started keeping my shoulders back, and it actually started making me feel like better about myself and more confident. I'm like, so there is something to these guys, and smart people we know, like Wesley Yang, who's a brilliant writer, wrote a whole thing where he was basically talking about how Jordan Peterson like
saved my life,
helped him feel better. So
I don't think that it's bad self-help advice on that level. And actually, Gorilla Mindset is full of posture advice.
This is Cernovich's book, Gorilla Mindset,
which Gorilla Mindset is not very different from 12 Rules for Life. It's actually not that incendiary. It's actually kind of just corny and boring, but it's not. It's not like offensive.
Yeah.
I mean, parts of it are offensive. But like on the whole, it's like sit up straight. It's like the same kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's not bad advice.
Well, but okay, but
well, and my sense, like what's part of what seems valuable is just telling these people who feel shitty about themselves, like you matter enough that I'm going to tell you how, like, you're redeemable. You, like, I see that you're more than just a slouchy dude, and I like you, or you could be someone I would like.
It's the same thing to me as like, I do not think at all that Jordan Peterson is as good at self-help as Kanye is at music. But like, if all the world went to Jordan Peterson for was self-help advice, I don't think there's a problem. It's when we go to him and say, like, how should we restructure our society based on how lobster hierarchies work? Like, what the fuck? Who decided that because lobsters have inborn gender hierarchies, like Fortune 500 companies should too? It makes no sense.
And that I mean, and I think that's this like slippery slope about so many of these podcasts. Like, I mean, I listen to them partly out of morbid curiosity, but also just like, admittedly, sometimes they make me feel pumped up. Like before a workout, they just make me feel good. Also, I think they're designed, in the wake of Me Too, in the wake of Trump's election, obviously there are a great deal of white dudes right now who feel like insecure and beat up upon. And these shows, which very often feature Peterson as a guest. Like Peterson's been, I think, on Rogan like 6 times. Mm-hmm. Like the whole idea is like, you don't have to feel bad about here's a space where you can feel decent about yourself, and like, you don't have to feel like you're a bad guy, And
a lot of it too.
And even me, there's a sucker part of me that's like, oh, all right, I feel comforted by that. Like, and it's embarrassing.
Well, doesn't everyone want to feel that way?
Well, I think there's a lot of also miscommunication where people, and I know this because I've met people like this who they see something in BuzzFeed that says like the 21 worst things about white people this month. And they get really offended by it. Like, you're telling me that I'm bad? I see that and I'm like, this is dumb. But I'm not like, they are saying that white people are worthless. Like, I'm like, this is like...
Or sometimes it's smart and you're like, yeah, they're deliberately engaging in hyperbole.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah, right. It's a kind of like, if I see someone on Twitter saying kill all men, I'm not like, they're coming for me. It's like, that's like a joke. That's not my favorite kind of joke, but I get it. I understand it. And it's like, it's fine. But there are people who, through whatever combination of like not being read into the cultural conversation, like this is the kind of thing that if I hadn't done the reporting, I might not take as a good faith confusion. Like, I might just take it as an act of trolling. I'm like, yeah, right, there are people out there who think that like kill all men is like genocide against men. But like, I've met people who really think that, and they are incorrect. I'm not denying that, but it's just like a lot. I was shocked at how much of this stuff is just miscommunication. How much like your thing you're saying about white men feeling beat up on is genuinely felt. Because I think a lot of people use that cynically. Obviously, a lot of the leaders of this movement don't feel beat up on in that way, but they're just harnessing that energy. And that goes all the way to the highest levels of politics. But there are people out there who are like, I am endangered. Like, I'm really... And yeah, I don't think that anyone has good answers for them. Like, I also don't think that the people they're going to for comfort have good answers for them, by the way. Like, getting pumped up for 10 minutes is not going to help your life.
Right. It's a fragility issue, right? I mean, so many of the people that you reported on, like, it just struck me like they felt hurt by things that they were reading, and felt scared or threatened on some level.
Yeah. And look, we all feel hurt and scared sometimes, but I got to say, there were a lot of times when I was like, I feel like I'm the most okay person in this room right now. Yeah. And I know that I'm supposed to be like the beta soy boy, whatever, but like, I feel fine about myself and my sexuality and like how I'm doing in the world. And like, maybe that's because of like my like entitlement or whatever, but like, maybe it's just psychological, constitutional, but it was a weird kind of reversal to be like, I'm supposed to be the one that they are making fun of because,
right.
But I'm like,
because supposedly you're insecure and stripped of your manhood. And
yeah, I'm like,
whatever.
I feel great about like myself and my position in the world. Like you guys are the ones who seem to be suffering.
Well, can you just speak to that for a second? Because like when I imagine doing what you did, And like if I read like if I will read like comments on a website, like it really does get my heart rate. Like just the animosity. Like I think I am one of those people that like I don't necessarily feel attacked, but I don't like that much anger, you know? And to be so immersed in it and to come out feeling okay about yourself and not get kind of contaminated by that. I'm just wondering like if you could speak to that.
There's a contamination factor for sure, like in the sense that I mean, I had to like watch a lot of video footage from Charlottesville, including like of like the woman getting killed. Like I had to watch a lot of terrible stuff. Now again, like I have friends who go to Syria and report on ISIS. I have friends. So again, like I'm not a coal miner. I'm not a war reporter. Like,
but that's still pretty.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And I definitely had moments of being like, I don't want to watch any more of this.
Yeah.
I even had a thing. There's like a little tiny motif in the book about Harambe the gorilla because that's like ground zero for a lot of kinds of memes. Like there's a lot of meme culture that's based on that.
Harambe was the gorilla that got shot at the Cincinnati Zoo, right?
Yeah, okay. And there was a time when I looked up on YouTube to see if you could see him getting shot in his cage, and I had to stop watching those videos.
Jeez.
So, like, there is stuff that I'm like, I wish weren't in my brain that is in my brain. About being in those rooms with those people, though, it's like, first of all, I never felt physically threatened by the alt-right people. The alt-right, actual, like, more edging toward the Nazi part of the spectrum, that was a little more ominous.
Have you been doxxed? Like, does that...
It wasn't as bad as I thought. People would threaten me and like...
Wait till the book comes out.
Yeah, I know. And like people would...
You better get all your shit.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, people would send me, you know, DMs that were bad and people would try to troll me on, you know, in public ways and make stuff making fun of me. But it wasn't as bad as I expected. Because honestly...
when people found out that you were Jewish, that's another just interesting and kind of funny and crazy part of the book, and it was also it was in the article, right, about Mike Enoch. When they found out that you were Jewish, did you get like the Photoshop picture of your head on a Auschwitz?
Yeah, in gas chambers and stuff.
Yeah,
and it's not
even
like
that stuff didn't affect you.
It's not like, I mean, I'm sort of making it sound like I'm like dead inside and none of that stuff. Like I don't like it, but I wasn't like, I don't know. Look, like, I feel like I obviously don't want anyone to like come after me, and I would definitely find that scary and unpleasant. I don't think they feel like they have any reason to, because I think I am not like engaged in a culture war with them in the way that their targets, first of all, their targets tend to be women, and second of all, their targets tend to be people who they feel like are engaged in a culture war with them, that are like trying to go toe to toe with them. I don't feel like, I mean, obviously, like...
You're, like, documenting.
You're telling their story.
Yeah, and I am, like, antagonistic to them in many ways that I'm fully open about. I'm not like, gee, I'm, like, trying to stay neutral about the Jewish question. But, like, I am not trying to meme them in a way that would make them want to meme me. Like, I'm not trying to, like, engage on that level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did you ever have moments, and we should really get into the advice question, but did you ever have moments where... you got like temporarily sucked into the blue pill, or is that the right even phrasing?
Red pill.
Red pill.
Did you ever get temporarily
not the real
sucked
exactly
into like
the real red pill is oatmeal?
I mean, I know you're saying that you felt for the most part solid, secure in your, you know, manhood and personhood or whatever. Did you ever have moments where you're like, shit, like maybe like I am too weak, or like maybe I am a little bitch, and like these guys, and like maybe like I'm a wimpy Jew, and like these guys, and like maybe I should like be more like Cernovich or what? Like, did you ever have moments where you were like kind of, because you spent so much time hanging out with these people, and also it's not like the interactions were always like I'm sure sometimes it was fun, and like some of these people actually come off as, even Cernovich comes off as a pretty nice guy actually.
Nice guy might be stretching it, but
or
yeah,
fun guy,
definitely
like a fun guy to hang out with. So did you ever have moments where you just were like, maybe like, I don't know, like there's something appealing about this, or were you always able to be at a remove?
I mean, I never had a moment when I was like, I really need to fundamentally, obviously, like, I don't sit there just plugging my ears and going, la, 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 I'm not listening to what you're saying. There are things that a lot of these people would say that I would hear and be like, oh, I mean, like, Gavin McInnes has really good taste in music, for example. Mm-hmm. So I would be like, it's not like everything he said I would just reject out of hand.
Yeah, that seems so hard to like. Yeah, I would want to reject all.
Yeah,
of
he's
it.
got great taste. I mean, he was the godfather of hipsterdom. He knows a lot about fashion and media, and Cernovich is a smart guy. He's a lawyer. He understands. He reads a lot. Like, so it's not like I, on every level, am just with every cell of my being like rejecting every syllable these people say. But am I going to reorient my life to not be a whatever wimpy Jew soy boy? Like, that's who I am. I don't care. I'm fine with it. I'm not like, you got to understand that this is like this is a cultural identity too. That my cultural identity is a cultural identity. It's not like a lack of. I mean, maybe it is the difference between being Jewish and being just like garden variety white, where you don't feel like you have a cultural identity. I don't know. I have some white friends, non-Jewish white friends, who feel that they don't have enough of a cultural identity, and that obviously is a problem, and it's a vacuum that bad people can prey upon.
Yeah.
But also it would be a problem if your whiteness was your entire identity, and like so. But I don't know. Being Jewish is a different thing, but also in just taking that whole thing out of it and just doing the masculine thing, like I don't care what. I don't know. Like
it sounds like that's been with you for a long time, like not wanting to be that kind of dude. Anyway.
It's fine. And like I've never been, I mean, really the last time I cared was when I really wanted to be Sean from Boy Meets World. And then when I accepted that I wasn't going to be that guy, it was like, I'm just Corey. Corey does fine. Corey ends up with Topanga. Sorry, spoiler. But like he's doing fine. He has a kid. They go to college during the college years. They have a kid. Like everyone works out fine.
All right, I have one more question on this, and then I promise we're going to get to the to our very important advice segment. Listening to a lot of these dude podcasts, right? One thing that has given me pause is the question of violence and the question of like, I have a son who's 2.5. He is now, for a long time, he was the most zen, chill kid ever. And at the playground, he would be the kid who had a toy and some dick took his toy. And he was
dick, like 3-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. Who I wanted to kill with
my,
just choke the life out of when I saw him. But like my son would always be super chill about it. And to be like, okay, these are public toys. Go ahead. Yeah. Now my son is taking toys from people and has become the aggressor.
He's that kid.
And he's become that kid. And but and I see obviously like he's in a violent phase now. And he pushes kids on the stairs sometimes. Like goes out of his way to push kids. I'm like, where does this come from? Whatever. But anyway, this is leading up to like when he's older. Let's say when he's in first grade. I'll give the first memory I have of being bullied in the schoolyard. Some kid came up to me in first grade.
Wow.
Somehow saw that I was a bitch, probably because my shoulders were hunched.
Oh man.
And he came right up to me and I guess he saw me looking at him or something. He came right up to me and said, "Don't fuck with me." And he headbutted me in the head. Right?
How old was this kid?
This kid was like probably a year older than me. I think he was in second grade.
He's telling you not to fuck with him.
But yeah, and first of all, I was like, that was such a dumb strategy because your head now hurts too.
I've never understood the headbutt as a move.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just think about like so many of these guys, like particularly on the Rogan podcast, are MMA fighters, and they do talk about like kicking people's asses. Like there was a guy on last week who was a world weightlifting champion, and then he had he had a massive heart attack and he had to get a heart transplant. He was talking a lot about like recovering from that and how, I mean, he didn't use these words, but kind of how the recovery was softening him up in some ways. But he said like, man, it really freaked me out going to a grocery store after the heart surgery because I couldn't do anything physically aggressive. So I was thinking like, he was scanning the grocery store and he was like, if somebody fucks with me, like they can just kick my ass now. Like I've always walked around knowing I can kick someone's ass. But anyway, all of this is a long way of saying, I wonder, like for the first time in my life, I'm wondering if my son is getting bullied in the schoolyard, is it okay to tell him to punch another kid in the face so that they will stop? Because that's the message of all of these dude podcasts, right? That's the baseline. Like, of course you should punch a bully in the face. I was raised by my soy boy dad to be like, obviously violence is horrible. Violence begets violence. Don't do it. Don't fight back. If you need to, talk to the teacher or whatever. And that's what I always did. But it never made me feel good about myself. I felt like a victim. And I wonder sometimes, like, I don't know, like I wonder sometimes, like, is this an area where maybe like the alt-right kind of dudes have a point that like maybe violence, like, in these kind of isolated ways is okay. And like, I don't know. So has there been anything like that like...
Well, yeah, I actually don't think that anybody is consistent about their stance on violence on the right or on the left. I don't think that all you have to do is, like there's that Nicholson Baker book, Human Smoke, like all about the pacifist resistance to World War II. And so the way that was an alternate history just shows like nobody is truly a pacifist. And it seems pretty clear that if Gandhi had had his way, like Hitler would have taken over the world. So like it's not, I don't think there really is anybody anywhere on a cultural or political spectrum who is consistent about this stuff. The thing that where the question of violence became an issue in the work I was doing for the book was the question of Antifa. Because like everyone can agree that like Nazi thugs rolling into Charlottesville with automatic weapons, everybody except for those people hates those people. Mm-hmm. Everybody. Mm-hmm. The neocons, like, but the question of what to do in response to that is pretty deeply divided. Do you respond to their violence with self-defensive violence? Do you respond to their violence with preemptive violence? Do you respond to their violence with... Now, in that particular case, I don't think you just have a shootout on the streets. Like, that just wouldn't solve anything. And I actually have, like, great admiration for all the people who were holding hands and sort of singing church songs and doing that kind of resistance. That's, like, real, like, 60s frontlines resistance. And, like, I am pretty close to just, like, nonviolence is the answer being my, like, political philosophy. That said, there's a difference between nonviolence in the sense of not like initiating aggressive violence and pacifism of just like turning the other cheek no matter what happens. Right. And like when it gets to a scenario like the quote unquote Battle of Berkeley, or like, the violence that breaks out whenever Richard Spencer tries to speak at a college or whenever Milo tries to speak at a college, I think obviously like the presence of guns heightens and like makes tragic all of these questions. But if you're just talking about fists, like, I don't know that the answer is always to turn the other cheek when like Proud Boys are trying to beat you up. I don't know that that's like philosophically or politically smart.
Right.
I don't think it makes sense to go around like provoking violence unnecessarily. Right. I just don't think it tactically makes sense. But I also, the way that we, as like, by we, I just mean like the general like mainstream of society, have dealt with the question of Antifa violence, I don't think anybody has figured out what to do about that. And I think if the blanket answer is just like Antifa's bad because they sometimes do violent things, I just don't think that gets at the question of like what kind of violence are we talking about? Because if it's self-defensive violence, it's just a different thing.
What have you thought about the question of when Gideon is... Andrew has a 2-year-old son also.
Like how to get him into Antifa as quickly as possible?
Yeah. Well, when he goes to school, if
I haven't
if he
gotten
gets
there.
in a fight,
Yeah,
I mean, I haven't really thought it through either.
And it's not like it's easy to give a flippant answer of like, I don't think there is a good answer to the question of that kind of bullying.
Yeah.
Again, like going back to my theme of just kind of living a sheltered life, I've gotten into a couple of fights in my life, but they weren't defining moments. What was more defining moments was like using my wits and my words to get out of situations like that. So again, that's like, I've been lucky in that sense. I mean, I do think about, living in New York City, I think about what would I do if somebody like mugged me or whatever. And I just don't think there's a good answer. Like, I don't think the answer is if I were really good at headbutting people, I would be able to get out of being shot on the street. Like, that's not an answer.
It seems like a myth to like, you're never going to protect yourself all the time.
Yeah. Like that guy in the grocery store could still get shot.
Right. It doesn't matter.
And this is why, honestly, I don't listen to all the episodes of Joe Rogan, because I'm just not that interested in how fighters Like, I think being a good fighter is cool. Like, being a good accordion player is cool. Like, being a good anything is cool. But I just don't see it as this primal, like, this is the only mystery we need to unlock to understand the universe.
And I mean, they often say, like, you'll never know what kind of a man you are unless you know if you can kick someone's ass.
Yeah, I'm like, you'll never know what kind of a man you are if you don't know how to write a good fucking email.
Right. Or play the accordion.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to our advice question.
Actually.
Let's do it. I should take a pit stop.
Yeah.
Go for it.
We'll use this time to run our Patreon pitch.
Oh, good.
Let's practice that, actually.
Do a quickie. Try a real quick, like under 30 seconds.
Okay, so if you like what you're hearing, there's a really simple, quick way that you can help us out, which is to go to patreon.com/heyman and
HeymanPod
and chip in $5, and that will really make sure that the show continues. We have a lot of interesting guests lined up over the next couple months, and we're going to keep bringing you good conversations. So please do your part to help out, and thank you.
I'm going to try this one, which is, if you like this show, thank you, and we're very appreciative. And if you want to give extra to this show, we also want to give extra to you, right? And $5 a month would make a huge difference at our Patreon page. And if you do that, there are lots of cool extra things that we will give in return to show our gratitude, like extra episodes and personalized thank yous, and maybe even the opportunity at some point to lend some of your own advice to the show. So stay tuned for that. And thanks.
I'm going to try a crazy one. If you don't like this show, fuck you. But if you do like the show, you can help us out. I'm just kidding. If you don't like the show, you can continue to hate listen.
Yeah.
And you could even hate donate $5 a month through Patreon.
Yeah, that would feel so good to just see us doing better and hate that so much.
But if you do like the show, you can also match the haters by donating $5 a month. And it's think about donating to your NPR station. You don't have to do it, and NPR will still come on the next morning, and we will probably do the show even if we're starving and have to sell all of our clothes because it means that much to us. But just being the kind of person that gives to the stuff, that supports the stuff that you value, feels good. So be one of those guys and
or gals. As an aside, I think I was reading something about setting that up.
Yeah.
And I think if there's like an exercise that we should go through about like because they have this idea of like value for value. Like, people just listen and they're not going to pay, but like we're going to give you extra and like they'll give us extra. Yeah. And like really being able to make the case like this is what the value is for. And then I think our pitches will be tighter.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
It's funny to have like this kind of like parallel. I almost feel like there's a version of this podcast that is like it's just like a Joe Rogan critique podcast, like in the way that there's like Game of Thrones podcasts.
Yeah.
I will say though, just before we get to the advice,
you're a big Joe Rogan fan.
Well, the thing I appreciate about it is that it's not journalism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a platform. Mm-hmm. It is a platform. So so he does sort of cavalierly platform insidious people with horrible thoughts. He also platforms like interesting people with really interesting thoughts. And what I like about it is just that it's so long that in the course of listening, like to somebody talk for that long, you just get stuff that you don't get from reading a profile, even a profile in the New Yorker sometimes. Yeah. So it's a valuable, even though I think you're on point about, and I mean, I feel the same way. I think when he has someone as dangerous as Alex Jones on, who is making the Newtown parents' lives a living hell, it's not a huge moral ask for Rogan to like think more critically about that. You know what I mean? He could still do the show, which I think the reason it's a good show is because it's not antagonistic and it just allows people to talk.
It's also the thing about it, which is doesn't have like a political valence really, but it's just like, I think it's the blessing and curse of that show. And I also think that I've been thinking about it while we've been talking, which is if you're too similar to your guests, you gain a lot in terms of easy access to resonance and but you also lose that friction. Like I've been the whole time I've been like, we're agreeing on way too much stuff. Like, you know, like we just are the same person. Yeah, I agree with you. But like, and I think Rogan has that problem too, where someone will be like, the progressive cultural Marxist left is destroying humanity. And he'll be like, yep. Like that's not, you want more friction there, but then it opens up all these other cool avenues of being able to be like nerding out about how termites work for 45 minutes. Down. Yeah. Yeah, you gain a lot from that.
In a way, it's kind of like a therapist, where like, you know, therapists aren't like contradicting you or like they're often just getting you to talk more.
I think about it as an improv thing, that whole rule of yes and. When I like took improv classes before because I am every part of the stereotype of what I am, and and the rule about yes and is not to say the word yes, it's to be in the scene in a way that to be in the scene in a way that facilitates the other person doing what they were going to do, which often happens before the words you say. It's like the character you choose to be,
right?
Because often, like the rookie mistake, I remember a very early improv. I think about this all the time when I walk around New York City, seeing how many people are paired up who are super similar. Like it's because often when you see rookie improvisers go into a scene, they'll be like, I'm like this guy raking leaves, and then they'll be like, I am a bank teller who's mad at you for raking leaves. And it's like, no, just be two guys raking leaves.
Right.
That's what you actually see in the world. Yeah. Is two guys who are the same kind of person being with each other, and more interesting stuff comes from that.
Yeah.
Like that's, I think, the great strength of Joe Rogan's show is that it's just two guys being the same guy in a room with slight variations that yields much more interesting stuff than, you know.
Yeah. It's two guys drinking CBD whey protein smoothies
for 5 hours.
Yeah. All right, let's
get to this. Yeah. So before I read it, basically the way we do this, which is helpful for, you know, all of our listeners or new listeners, is I'm going to read the question and then we will like just talk it through, and like it's less about the advice and more like what we're hearing, the themes in the question and what we make of it, and in that way we'll probably arrive at some advice for this person.
We'll try to save, if we have any killer advice,
we usually summarize that like at the end.
The killer.
Yeah. Hey man, I find myself in a confusing and uncomfortable situation and I don't know what to do. I recently moved to New York from Maine, where I grew up and went to college, and I've been living with the same group of guys for about 9 months. I like them all and I feel a bit of pressure to fit in. I'm not a typical bro, but I know how to act that way and I want everyone to like me. Since I've lived there, I've become really good friends with one guy. We hang out one-on-one, and I've had some real honest conversations that feel deeper than the usual bro-y banter that we all engage in as roommates. Lately, though, something's shifted, and he's been teasing me in front of our other roommates in ways that feel like more than just ball busting. I'm 5'7", skinny, and I'm almost always the smallest guy in the group. It's something that I've always felt self-conscious about, and he's been teasing me about my size in ways that feel humiliating, especially since it's in front of our roommates and sometimes their girlfriends. This also isn't the first time something like this has happened. In high school, some good friends also bullied me in much worse ways, but again, by humiliating me in front of other people. I'm not sure what to do. Am I just being extra sensitive to the situation because of what happened before? Is there legitimately something wrong with me that I'm being targeted again? How should I handle this and what should I do? Signed, Wimpy in Williamsburg.
All right, I am actually just going to cut straight to the advice. Pull your fucking shoulders back.
Yeah. Chapter 1.
Get a spinier lobster shell.
I didn't expect this to match up so well with like what we had just been talking about. Yeah. But
so first thing that pops out to me is just that this is a pattern.
Yeah.
That like he has been the dude who gets shit on at different stages in his life, right?
That stood out to me too.
And I don't think just because you're short, you get...
It's also 5'7" isn't that short.
That's true, actually. Yeah, you're right. 5'7" is not that short. But so
I was waiting for the like, I've got this really weird birthmark that makes me a freak. It's like,
funny.
My thing is I'm average height.
Yeah. Like I think we all have our thing
Yeah.
that we think makes us horrible, or you can go there.
Yeah.
And it's like nobody else cares most of the time.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating based on my own past when I used to get to some degree I still even get like grouped on by my group of college friends sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and I definitely got I don't want to make it seem like I was a victimized, bullied kid. I was relatively popular and socially successful, but I was in the echelon of popular and socially successful kids. I was the one who got shit on in that group. So like, and looking back on it, I definitely, without going too far into it, like I now realize that I was clearly making myself a target in some ways.
How so? You don't have to get too into it.
Well, no, I think I was.
How did that make you feel?
But I think I was being. I don't know. I think I was. As listeners can probably tell, I fucking talk a lot, right? So I think I talk a lot when I'm nervous, and I think like so that could have been one factor. Like, here's this kid who talks too much. And also they could sense like, oh, he's like an anxious, nervous kid, and like sense some weakness there. Maybe
you're also a very earnest person.
And I can be earnest, and I have my nasty acerbic side that can come out, but I allow an earnestness to come in, and I think that is a factor that can sometimes lead to be. So he doesn't really get into. We can only speculate why he's, but it does. I wonder though, like in general, when an adult, when a kid is getting bullied, it's usually for the stupidest shit, like they have a birthmark or,
But you're getting at something that I feel like we talk more about how shitty it is to be a bully and how mean that is. And we don't talk about like the person who's bullied does often open themselves up in some way to being bullied. Like some people don't get bullied, or someone tries to fuck with you and it just doesn't
rolls off. Yeah.
Right. And they move on, but it sticks with the person where it has an impact, and there's something about you that is allowing that.
And I will say, like, so
that's my motto: blame the victim.
I'm a good therapist, right?
Definitely for me, though, I would say it was just the fact that I deeply cared what other people thought about me at that age. Mm-hmm. So, and these kids could probably sense that I deeply cared about what other people thought about me.
Yeah, otherwise it's not fun. The thing, I thought about this all the time when I was a kid, because my whole portrait of myself as like impervious to like being like trolled by alpha males, that only locked in as an adult. As a kid, I was like a fat kid who got bullied all the time. And I used to study, because it's exactly what you're saying, there were fat kids who didn't get bullied. I was like, how do they pull it off? And I think I must have eventually figured this out. I know the answer now, which is they didn't care. They were just who they were. They were like, yeah, I'm the fat kid. It's a physical fact about me. And just, you can tell me I'm fat and I just don't care. It's like, look at how cool like fat rappers are. They're like, yeah, fat is in my name. Like, go ahead, tell me I'm fat. That's my name. I don't care. Like, so... But as a kid, I was not okay with who I was. So I was not, and so I would let it get to me every time. And then you just create more of a, I don't know how you, although I guess because this is an advice thing, I don't know how you get out of that. If you don't want to be, this guy's saying he doesn't want to be slightly less than average height and skinny or whatever his thing is.
Sorry, you're not.
That's your thing. You could work on the skinny part. You can't work on the height part. But like, it's okay. I guess I think with so many like heterosexual male things, the real underlying thing is you're not like sexually desirable enough. That's always the thing. Like, that's the undercurrent of every kind of male to male straight guy bullying.
But it's like guys telling it, like, it's not like he's hearing this from women. It's, right.
It's in front of women.
Insulting him, and humiliating him.
In front of women. Who are other people's girlfriends who he's ostensibly not trying to get with anyway.
It feels very, this guy, like, it feels very primate, like he's sort of being targeted.
That is actually, to get back to your question about was there any insight that you did kind of gravitate toward with the alt-right type stuff? So the way I answered that was, did you ever want to try to change the way you lived according to their principles? And the answer to that is no. But the notion, so Cernovich's whole brand is gorilla mindset because his insight is that a lot of people make decisions based on what I call in the book brute simian logic. That like you can make fun of me by branding myself a gorilla. You can say I'm a big dumb ape or whatever, but like that's going to work for me more often than it's not. And like he could have branded himself the nerdy lawyer guy who grew up poor and made a rags to riches. Like that might have been his self-branding in the 80s, but his self-branding now is I'm a fucking gorilla. And like, so I never was like, I should brand myself as a gorilla, but I was like, that is his insight that people respond better to that than they think they will is right, I think.
Which is the thing, though? Is it the clarity of saying this is what I am, or there's something about being a gorilla that people do respond
I think
to?
that people, like, if you are like a big guy who is confident, people are going to respond well to that in ways that are totally unjust sometimes.
Yeah.
And that like in the way that like it should not be the case that like the male tall person is more likely to be president than the shorter or more female person.
Yeah.
That's obviously an injustice in our society, but it's also a true fact.
Yeah.
So like acknowledging that true fact and harnessing it to your advantage is just like an entrepreneurial advantage. Now, this guy can't make himself taller than he is, but he can make himself more confident than he is. I don't think that being more confident is the answer to like all your problems in life, but it would help with this scenario.
Helps with a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets tricky, though.
How
the fuck do you become more confident? I mean, honestly.
And also, how do you become more confident by not just being a dipshit or a douchebag?
Right, because I think like there's a part of me, or like me in middle school would be like, okay, like you should work out, dude. Like if you're 5'7" and skinny, like if you feel better about your body, then like
I mean, honestly, I'm not discounting.
Like I think that might be kind of true.
I want to get back to the question of whether he should work out.
Well, that's always your answer.
But I think like to this question of like being confident doesn't mean being a dick. Like the game, the whole like book.
Yeah, I was
the
thinking
game,
about that too.
Like that is about being a dick. Like it's about like negging the woman, saying mean things to the woman.
Well, there's a huge part of my book that is about pickup artistry, and actually not even the guy. So the game was by this guy Neil Strauss, who was a journalist who did a participatory observer thing,
and then got
sucked in. Which is I think what people are like afraid of when they think of me doing this stuff.
Right.
But and then was like going around trying to ghostwrite Alex Jones's book and stuff. Like he got sucked way in.
I feel really like I've heard interviews with him. I feel bad for that.
Yeah, but this stuff, like there's like the people I write about were like the real version of that, not like the guys who went on MTV with eyeliner and stuff. They were like, and so this is why I'm always cautious to say you should be confident and be a dick and neg people because it'll make you feel better. It's like, what do we mean by feel better? It will also make you feel better to do a bunch of coke and buy a Maserati, but like, maybe for a day, but that's not a good answer. So like becoming an asshole and a misogynist, and like, will it mean that you can pick up women in bars? Yeah, I'm sure it will. But like, I don't think that what you're actually
fill the hole inside.
Exactly. Yeah, there are jokes I'm not making, but yeah, that's like, I don't think. And like that seems like a squishy kind of kumbaya-ish kind of answer, but it goes back to the thing we were saying about hedonism and food. It's the same thing with hedonism and sex and relationships. You can have the McDonald's version, which is I want to have sex with a stranger now.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean, whatever. Like for some people that makes them feel better the next morning.
We
and
do
that's
live
fine.
in a world you can do any of this.
Sure,
shit now.
that's fine.
Like,
right. So get an app and go do that.
Yeah.
But like, it's not. That doesn't answer the question of what will actually make you fulfilled in a longer time frame.
Yeah,
it just doesn't. Maybe it's that, but like, for one thing, it's not like necessarily the best kind of hedonism on a like week-long basis rather than a day-long basis. And the other thing is there are certain moral boundaries that like people shouldn't cross, and being like an asshole and hurting people is one of them.
Right, like manipulating women so they'll have sex with you.
Literally, the thing, there's like all this, there's this whole like glossary of like all these specific terms of like sexual marketplace value and like ways that the hamster wheel, there's all this terminology in pickup artistry that gets super deep, and it's like any other internet nerd subculture. You can just go down a rabbit hole with it. I would advise that you don't. But like one of their terms is the dark triad. And if you really want to pull a lot of women and like make a lot of closes or whatever the fuck their thing is, you should exhibit the dark triad of personality traits. The dark triad is Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy.
Jeez.
And they're like, hey, it works really well, you know? And it's like, I'm sure it does, man. I'm sure it does. But if you've gotten to the point where you're like, in order to get laid, I'm going to become a psychopath,
Right.
something went wrong.
Yeah.
So,
I guess I was gonna. My thought though is like, what is appealing about all of these things is agency, right? Is being able to say like, I'm in control. I can do something. I'm gonna. That those things all give you, whether it's working out or now I do know how to get laid. I guess.
Well, okay. So to get back to the working out thing, right?
Yeah.
Here's one reason why I'm not ruling out he should go work out. I don't think that he should work out to get bigger muscles, because I actually think like if you feel insecure about being short and then you're the short guy with huge muscles, you're still going to feel insecure.
Are we still doing the Joe Rogan critique podcast?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do think like the reason to actually work out is because it's doing something hard and uncomfortable consistently. And when you do something hard and uncomfortable consistently, that is a pretty good formula for confidence, because you're like, oh, I proved to myself over and over that I'm okay with doing something hard and uncomfortable. So, and meditation is a similar thing. Meditation is extremely hard and uncomfortable, I think, for almost everybody who does it. And I think meditation does help build confidence. If you do it, even though you know it's going to be hard and you're going to fail over and over and over again, like that's the kind of thing that. So I actually think there is an answer to the like, how do you get confidence? I don't think you get. I don't think you ever get confidence through an epiphany.
Yeah.
Or through an advice book. You do not get confidence from even reading a Jordan Peterson book, but you might get confidence from reading a Jordan Peterson book and then having that spur you to like become a serious meditator or something. I think the way you get confidence is through a routine practice and doing this fucking thing over and over and over and over.
But like this sense of like expanded capacity that you can only really get if you dedicate yourself to something.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Yes. I think that's the best thing about Jordan Peterson is the idea that like meaning and value come from struggle, from carrying a heavy load, as he says. I think that's the thing I agree with him about the most.
Yeah, I totally, me too. So
I think you should do the advice round as a Jeopardy thing where you say the answer is work out and meditate and then ask the question.
Right. By the way, meditation is something that I partially learned about through talking to Andrew, or at least going on a retreat. I had never been on, I've now been on several retreats, but Andrew had gone on a couple of retreats and sort of gave me a sense of what it was like. He was the one that put the idea of going to a retreat into my consciousness. And I went on a 7-day retreat. The first retreat I did was 7 days.
Wow.
Definitely the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. By far the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Mine were 10 days. It was definitely the hardest thing.
And
you're now better at being a regular meditator than I am, which is great. But that I was totally the same way, like in terms of, I don't know if it's confidence, but just like faith in your ability to tough it out. Because I didn't know how to write a book. People were like, how are you going to write a book? I was like, I have no idea, but I've done this other thing that I know is harder.
Yeah, that, I mean, honestly, like now I'm in a really like disciplined workout thing. There's no way I would have been able to get to that without having done a 7. It's true. Every time I think about like, oh, this is going to be way too hard, I'm like, somehow I managed to do a fucking silent retreat for 7 days. And the reason why, by the way, it's so crazy, these retreats, I can't even imagine 10 days, but like,
there's 3 extra days.
You don't even get to write in your journal. You don't even get to read a book. Wow. You don't get to do anything but meditate. That's all you're allowed to do the whole time. I mean, you actually could cheat and then you'd waste.
I actually
experience.
won, so I did 2. One of them I cheated and did the journal, but it was actually, I feel like comparing the one I did and the one I didn't, I actually would do it again with a journal, because otherwise it's just, you're trying to hold on. If the idea is to let go of your thoughts, I could just let go of them by putting them out there. And then I was like, I could like burn the journal at the end. I was glad I didn't because I ended up writing an essay about it.
Right. This was a big part of struggle for me. It was like every time I would have like a thought that I really wanted to hold on to, I would stress so much about whether I was going to forget.
That stress was what I was trying to get out of.
But look, it like I've never talked about doing a retreat on any of our conversations on the podcast, but I totally recommend it. Even if you don't know anything about meditation, and if you've basically barely meditated, I think a retreat is an amazing experience.
I've only done like a weekend, but you guys are making me want to go for the long haul.
It is a different thing.
It's but yes, nothing is scarier than being alone with your own thoughts and not having anyone to share it with for a long time.
Okay,
anyway, back to the question.
The thing that we're really not talking about, though, maybe because we're all soy boys, is that we can talk about building confidence, but this guy's friend is fucking with him,
right?
And like, what should he do with that?
Well, I think that the thing that Sam started with is that it'll become less fun to fuck with you if you're less
if you're
fuckable
just unruffled.
Yeah.
And like, just like, okay.
Well, I think that's part of the answer to why didn't the alt-right guys and alt-light guys go after me more, is that it just wasn't that fun for me. It wasn't that fun for them. Sorry. At first, I was really trollable.
What would you do though? Like in this situation, it's not just like any roommate. This is a guy that he also feels close with, which seems more complicated.
Well, he got into this thing where he called it ball busting. He couldn't tell what was the line between ball busting and real.
Yeah.
I
which
get
feels
that.
like a lot of male friendships.
I get that.
Yeah.
I've been in male spaces where it was like, you don't want to go to zero because then you're really an outcast. If nobody is ragging on you at all,
right,
then you're really the weirdo.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have these roommates and nobody calls you short ever or whatever, it's just like it has like a
That's
certain
kind of good.
Right. It's just a certain tinge to it that he thinks is crossing a line. And I do feel like their relationship is not the kind of one where he could sit down and be like, I would like to have a serious talk with you now about
this.
It
really hurts my feelings.
Maybe he could. I don't know.
This is funny. Like a lot of the questions that we deal with end up coming back to this like ultimate dilemma of whether you should just like confront your friend.
It's worrisome,
and we
to
never
me.
say you should do that.
It's worrisome to me that we always land on don't do anything; it'll blow over. It's okay.
Well, actually, no. Often, not to get too meta, but often what will happen is we'll be like, "All right, do this like sort of more avoidant, like either white lie strategy or like just like slipping your way out of the situation strategy rather than direct confrontation." Then we'll like come back in the other direction and be like, all right, let's like man up here and do the let's do the hard version, which is the direct confrontation. And then we end up kind of like settling on like, okay, what is like a more direct confrontation that isn't like weird and like autistic and alienating,
right?
To do to like, because let's be real, it would be so weird if there was somebody that you felt close to, one of your male friends who you rag on, and all of a sudden he's like, we need to have a sit down convo about how you trample my feelings. You'd be like, what? That I would be so weirded out by that I would actually like question whether or not I wanted to be that dude's friend. To be honest.
Well, I mean, it would.
Because I'd be like, this dude is so hypersensitive.
Yeah.
Like, this is annoying. You know?
I've had this. It wasn't with getting ragged on or whatever, but I've had a thing where there's something that a male friend is doing that's hurting my feelings, where I'm like trying to decide whether to make it a thing or not. Mm-hmm. And I generally do the more avoidant thing like you're talking about, partly because I'm scared and I don't want to have that awkward conversation, but also partly because there are some kinds of awkward conversations that it's hard to go back from. Even if you survive the half hour of awkwardness, you can never unhave that conversation. So it's like it changes the tenor of the relationship.
You know, it's worrisome to me. First of all, I agree, and I'm trying to imagine a situation in which I would also bring it up. And I don't think, not to get like super, this is another trope of our conversations, which is like gendering it and stuff. But like, I don't think women worry about, like, they totally do have those conversations and their relationships do bounce back, I think. You know, like it is a little too bad. I worry that we're just like perpetuating the same thing of like, just don't let it blow over.
Right. And I don't even know how gendered it is, because I've had conversations with female friends, conversations with male friends that do get really, you know, earnest and deep and sort of personal.
But about them,
and it's
about
fine.
Someone hurting your feelings.
And it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes it's not, and you aren't friends anymore, but sometimes it's totally fine.
Yeah.
It's just, it depends on the nature of the relationship. Like, yeah, I have people who I could sort of have any kind of conversation with.
You know what? I mean, this also makes me think about this. Like, I can have those conversations with people that I've known for a long time
Right.
or feel really close with. And there is like kind of, I'm not sure how you make that transition in a relationship to suddenly like, we're going to like talk about my feelings. You hurt them, you know. Like,
I think you said it. I think it's time.
it's time, just trust and time. And then one day someone has to
I
take
can't
the lead.
imagine being like within a 6-month window of a friendship
that
and
would
be
be
like,
intense.
I would like you to have a seat. It's like, okay, this isn't worth it anymore. But yeah, 6 years, I mean, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think of like what's an example without naming particular friends, but like what's an example of like the kind of thing that a male friend has done that like hurt you or annoyed you that you then confronted him on? Because I'm trying to. I mean, I
So
guess
I had a friend who is a very go with the flow kind of guy, and I love hanging out with him. I love talking to him. And this is just part of who he is. I don't expect that to change. But part of what I like about it's great to be a go with the flow person, but it also means that I don't feel like he's always prioritizing me. Like, you know, when he comes to town, he really wants to make time for me and see me and stay with me and, you know, meet my kid and all that stuff. I feel like he's like, oh, we'll see what happens. And I'm like, dude, you're in town for a week. Let's pick a day. Like, I'm busy. I don't see you all the time. Like, commit a day to me to like hang out with me. That would make me feel important, and it would mean that we would actually see each other.
Yeah.
Rather than like, I don't know, the day kind of got away from me. Like, maybe next time I come to town in a year, like that hurts my feelings.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, he would totally understand, and it wouldn't at all. I'm not worried that it would end our relationship. It's just my only hesitation is like, A, do I want to create an hour of awkwardness in both of our lives? And B, do I want to have him then feel, because he would feel bad. He would be like, of course I don't want to hurt your feelings. Like, I just am a go with the flow kind of guy. And it's like, how much is it worth it? Or would it even change anything?
So I have a friend who's the exact same way, and I feel hurt particularly that he doesn't really seem to care about meeting my new kid. I have a new 4-month-old, or really cared about meeting my older kid either. But also part of what I appreciate about
Which is like, just to pause on that, did you care about meeting people's kids before you had kids? Because it hurts my feelings too when people don't make a big deal about the fact that I had a kid, but I'm trying to put myself in a position of like, was I organically like desirous of meeting someone else's baby? I am now because I know how cool babies are.
No, back then I was far less.
Yeah.
Dependent on the friend.
Yeah.
But I was far less. Like, I mean, Sasha, my wife, was like much more enthusiastic about the kid meeting than I was.
Yeah.
Now I am enthusiastic.
Totally.
And not just because it's tit for tat. I just like realize how amazing it is.
Oh yeah, I would hang out with toddlers all day long if I could. Yeah.
But yeah, so I have this friend who's super go with the flow. Yeah, and he doesn't have kids. But also I feel hurt by him sometimes that he can just go through incredibly long periods of time without being in touch. But I feel torn because I'm like, part of what I like about this dude is that
quality.
Yeah. That he's a go with the flow guy. He can drop into my life. We can have an amazing time. And then like he'll be gone for a while, but like it's a low commitment thing or whatever. So but I don't know, just thinking about all of this, like I'm realizing like I do think it's a gendered thing that dudes have a much deeper like fear of awkwardness in confrontation than women seem to. And like Sasha is really good at just like directly talking to her friends when she feels like they've been like letting her down or like not
My wife
being
is
in
so
touch.
good at it to the point where I am like, I think that the health of our marriage is because of it. Like her ability to do that with me.
Yeah.
Because there's no non-awkwardness marriage. That's not an option.
Yeah.
So she's just like, we're gonna do this, and I'm like, please let me go to sleep. Like I just would rather. She's like, it's 2 PM. I'm like, I don't care. But it's like, and sometimes I'm right. Sometimes I'm like, this isn't a productive conversation. But most of the time, if there's something there to be worked out in a marriage, it's like she's right that it should be worked out, and she's right about how to do it.
I guess I agree with you, and it makes me think like when you're, the thing that I think a lot of us forget when it comes to our guy friends is like when you're pissed at someone or hurt, like it is a pull for the relationship. Like you're saying, like even if you're mad, like it's going to make us closer if we could figure this out, instead of like I have friends just like the ones that you two were talking about, and it's like it kind of trickles away slowly. Like if you don't speak up for it, then like, well, then he may never come in to see, you know, and like, and you'll resent him and stop texting as much because he's not trying so hard, and it just kind of goes away.
Right.
And it's just so uncomfortable though to imagine saying anything.
Yeah, I'm just trying. I'm just trying to imagine, because okay, so I actually think like in Andrew's example and my example, like those are examples where we should just say something to this friend, like, I really want you to meet Mike, and I think there's a way to say it in a non-guilt trippy way. It's like, yo, come on, man. Like you could even like
what's wrong with him feeling a little?
There could be
guilty?
a jocular edge to it. Be like, bro, like stop being a fucking flake.
You need to meet my seed.
Get the fuck over here. You know, like you can do it in a right. You can do it in a way where you don't have to utter the phrase "you hurt my feelings." You know, but this guy's situation, the reason why I feel like it's even more awkward is because
it's a new relationship for one. But
it's a new relationship, and also just the question of like humor and being offended. That gets into the whole like snowflake thing of like, is he like, maybe it is his issue that he's just super easily offended. Like, what's his deal? You know, and like, and you don't want to seem like a snowflake to this guy that you really like and want to be a friend with, want to be closer friends with. Like, you don't want to seem like a snowflake. So if you are calling him out, you are playing your hand and admitting on some level that you are a snowflake, or, or that you're offended.
The solution that I don't know if it's the right solution, but it's the one that I would probably have implemented if I were in that situation, is to just come up with a better comeback. Like if the scenario repeats itself in this Groundhog Day kind of way, like he calls you short in front of people, you know the guy, come up with a better insult, one that's proportional, not one that's like, I read your secret diary and I'm going to humiliate you, but just like, there's a physical thing about you that I can rag on, and like either that will like release your tension because you'll feel cool for a second, or it will make him get a taste of his own medicine or whatever. I mean, it's like you don't have to just sit there.
I kind of do like that solution. I mean, it is in a way akin to punching the bully in the schoolyard. It is playing fire, fighting fire with fire.
But it's not even fire. It's like totally fine for people to call each other names. It's
right. And I think, but if he's gonna play that game, he's going to fail unless he has actual confidence.
Like
so first he's got to meditate, go on a meditation retreat and lift weights. Because
while you're meditating, just think the whole time of the perfect
insult, and then come back
10 days.
The jerk store called. They're adding you.
Exactly. But the problem is, even if he comes up with a good zinger, if he delivers it in
a not confident way,
then he's just going to continue to get bullied, you know?
It's a struggle you're going to have to work at it, I guess.
But I mean, I guess the best case scenario of that is not that, like, it's not that you know how to deliver one jab and then you don't know how to defend yourself after that.
Yeah.
Like the best case scenario is like the scales fall from the bully's eyes and he goes like, oh, that's what it feels like to go a little bit too far.
Yeah.
Then you're showing rather than telling.
Right.
That's a great point. I also just think that we should leave open the door to the possibility that maybe you have poor taste in wanting to be such good buddies with this guy.
Yeah, like if this has happened to you twice in your life, like it's possible that like you need to develop this skill and then like the friendship will change and you'll stop getting fucked with. Or like, you're kind of gravitating towards like these dicks.
Yeah.
And you want to find other friendships.
I mean, how old is this guy again?
I don't know.
He's in his 20s. Or did he not?
Sounds very.
Because I was going to say, like, one of the great pleasures of being in my 30s is that like, I just so rarely encounter other dudes my age like giving me a hard time being a dick. You know, like it's so much rarer than it was in my 20s, and like way rarer than it was.
Someone coming over to your house with a baby Bjorn and being like, your hair sucks.
Right. Exactly. So like, you know,
it's very transparent what's going on.
So basically, it gets better.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You will eventually have fewer friends who do. But look, it's kind of it's a slightly red flag that even in the 20s, if there is a dude who is insensitive enough to not just kind of rag on you in private, but to do it in front of other dudes and their girlfriends.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
that's a red flag about this guy. And I'm, he might have a lot of redeeming qualities and like try to come up with the zinger with confidence, see if that like cools
But
things
also,
down.
yeah, don't worry about like if I don't know why does this guy have to be your friend?
Right.
Like, just you can live with him and have him be your roommate and go find friends somewhere else. I'm sure there's an app for that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, my meditation teacher like talks a lot about like how to deal with difficult people, and the preferred first option is to have a mindful approach and to not allow them to. He talks about basically like cutting the cord. So if there's like if someone turns on a light switch but you cut the cord, like the light is not going to turn on. So like somebody can insult you. You do not have to be hurt and angry by the insult if you're good at practicing mindfulness or whatever. But he says like, and then at a certain point, like you can walk away at a certain point.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to tough it out forever and try to make it better. Like at a certain point, a good way to deal with difficult people and a humane thing to do for yourself and for them is to leave. And it's humane for them too, because like they need to start getting the fucking picture that it's not cool to like rag on your 25-year-old bro for being short, like this guy needs to get a clue or he's going to end up friendless himself, so
it's kind of reminding me of you ever seen that show, The Other Two? It's a really good show. It's on,
about the
Justin Bieber kid.
Yeah, I've seen the ads, but yeah.
Oh,
it's really good.
It's recent, right?
Yeah, it's two siblings. The other two is the other two siblings of the teenage heartthrob pop star. They're the older brother and sister. And the older brother has a crush on his straight roommate. But his straight roommate also kind of just decides to make out with him sometimes. So it's like a really good B plot in this show. But it's all these things where this guy is so much cooler than his meathead roommate, who he just like physically finds attractive. So he keeps hanging out with his dumb roommate and his dumb friends and trying to appease their dumb sensibilities when he is cooler. Like, I don't know this guy. I don't know if he's cooler than his roommates or not. But like what this guy in the show should really be doing is making friends with people who he's actually friends with.
Right.
And in the show you understand why he's hanging around, because he like wants to have sex with this guy. I don't understand what's in it for you. Yeah.
My like Bible for that is the like penultimate episode of Freaks and Geeks, which I watched so many times as I was writing my book for inspiration. But
it's good for the Boy Meets World, My So-Called Life vein of like it gets better kind of television.
Totally. And I mean, I think this is like one of the greatest episodes in TV history, but Daniel Desario, who's played by James Franco, who's like the cool kid, badass, whatever guy, gets like in trouble and he's forced to go hang out with the geeks who all work in the AV room, like setting up the audiovisual equipment.
Yeah, it's Breakfast Club.
And he realizes that he actually like kind of likes them way better than his cool friends.
Yeah.
And they like the most socially awkward of the geeks, this really fat, smelly kid, is like, hey, like we're doing D&D this Friday and we're gonna like have some cans of soda and some like sweet snacks. Do you want to come over? And like the other geeks are like, oh God, I can't believe you just did that. But he's like, sure. And like he goes over and has like the best night of his entire life.
Yeah.
And I just love that.
That is ultimate nerd porn. Like,
totally.
I could get James Franco to hang out with me.
Totally. But I don't know. I mean, I think at a certain point,
find
your
friends.
geek friends.
Yeah.
Find your short friends. No. But I mean, and also like just I like the idea of trying to push back with your wits, because it's also just that will be a good indicator of like the kind of dude this guy is.
Can you pick up on it or not?
Yeah,
if he just headbutts you in response, then like you should find a new apartment.
Right, exactly.
All right, everyone, that's it for our show this week. If you have a question, you can send it to us at heymanpod@gmail.com, or better yet, give us a call. Leave a voicemail at 917-426-4326. You can find us on Instagram or Twitter at heymanpod. And if you have a second, leave us a review, please. Apple Podcasts or wherever else you get your podcasts.